Hey, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Friday Night Conversation. My name is Roy Todd. I'm the lead pastor here at the Junction Church. I got some brilliant people with me tonight. We got Pastor Joe, Pastor Jonah. We also got Angie with us tonight. She's amazing. She leads our youth ministry, TRG. And tonight, we're going to be chatting to you about navigating change. In fact, I think the official title is Handling Change, but I say navigating change because I have to be different. But so we're talking about how to navigate change. And so we're going to just be chatting around the subject tonight. It's dead chill, dead relaxed. We're on the Zoom tonight because we thought that's just, that's change. If we're going to talk about change, we might as well do things a little bit differently. Everybody who's listening on Spotify, you won't be able to see that. But hey, just trust us. We're changing tonight. But let's just do a little bit of an opener. Then Jonah will ask the serious questions. But hey, Joe, how do you do with change?
Oh, sometimes
Do you like it?
Yeah, yes and no. It depends. But I think probably the my kind of dominant reaction is usually to go into a bit of a panic.
Really?
Yeah, sometimes.
And why is
Just
that?
like it's just like what's going on? I just feel like the floor has been like ripped up from beneath you, and all sense of control you had is just gone. But then eventually you realize it's not that bad, and then you kind of realize, well, you've just got to deal with it, so you deal with it. But I think more often than not, I tend to, even though I don't show it externally, inside I'm going crazy. Yeah.
You're like a swan, calm on the outside, but
Basically,
your little feet are paddling like crazy
doing all
down
of that.
underneath the
Yeah,
water.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I get you. What about you, Jonah? How do you deal with change? Do you like it or do you hate it?
Do you know what? I love it when it doesn't change. I
Hang on,
absolutely love
hang on.
routine.
You love it when you love change when it doesn't change. What's that mean?
I love life when it just doesn't change. I like it
Oh, you
when
like
I can
okay.
have my routines, and I'm very much a creature of habit. So I feel like I take a lot of joy in just going through the routines where I know what's going to happen, and I can just go for it, and I can know what's going to happen in the week, and I'm going to love it, and it's going to be great.
A creature of habit. There you go.
Mm-hmm.
Angie, you look like a real change agent to me. Am I right?
I hate to break it to you, Pastor Roy. I am not a fan of change either. I feel like because I feel like you get into a routine and rhythm that like change just disrupts it all, and I'm just I can't deal with change as well as I should do.
Yeah,
we at
I
least
hear
have
that.
one person who likes change on the panel.
Well, I used to love change, and then I got old. So, I was kind of there. I think sometimes maybe the older you get as well, the less you like change. But change is here to stay. I heard somebody say once it is here to stay, and certainly, my word, 2020, and now we're into 2021. Life has changed, the world has changed, circumstances have changed everything unexpectedly, but I guess you've got to roll with it. And so Jonah's going to ask a bunch of questions, and we're going to try our best to answer them with some level of seriousness, and with a dodgy joke or two, Jonah, thrown in for good measure as well. Go on, Jonah, ask us some questions then. Let's get the subject going.
Brilliant. I love that. A podcast about change with 4 people who don't like change. It's amazing. Just to kind of continue opening it up a bit then, because I suppose even, you think, Pastor, you mentioned about 2020 and all the change you went through there. And you even think like within the last week, we've had snow, and, you think about all the changes that brings, and you think about all of the daily changes that you go through when life is more normal. And so, first off, what impact do you think that living in a world that is changing increasingly rapidly has on people?
Well, if you hate change, I think that you're going to struggle with it. I suppose in one way, when change happens suddenly and unexpectedly, and you weren't really particularly prepared for it, that can be particularly challenging, which I guess is what makes this season very challenging for people. We weren't warned about this, like back in 2015, nobody said, hey, listen, just little heads up, 2020, 2021, going to be a couple of big years there. Nobody told us this. So I think that it's not just about change, but it's probably how change comes about. Sometimes it comes about and it's a welcome change, but then sometimes it's a kind of an unwelcome change. You think, oh no, I was really enjoying life, and then suddenly all this stuff has happened. So I suspect that there's lots and lots. It's not just a simple matter of I like change, I don't like change. I suspect there's a whole load of issues going on in that challenges all. What does everybody else think about that?
I think on another side as well, like when things are always changing rapidly, it can almost it can almost desensitize people. I think some people go there, some people go to that place where their kind of mechanism to deal with change is to just not deal with change, or to become desensitized to it all. And it's like everything's changing so rapidly, so why should I care? Almost.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's definitely, I feel, a possibility of heading in that direction. It's probably not the most healthy of directions to have. Now, to head in, rather, some people might say, oh, that's just developing a thick skin and dealing with stuff. But on the flip side, it's you're not really coming to terms with what's going on in life, and it's almost you kind of exist aloof of everything else that's going on. And I feel like that can be a reaction as well to rapid change in that sense. Yeah.
And I suppose one of the challenges is that when things do change, if we don't change to adapt, then the challenge is we get left behind, don't we?
Absolutely.
And this is the challenge, even for me in my own life. You think, well, I can't do things the way I did things 20 years ago because it's not 20 years ago. It's 2021, not 2001. And back in 2001, we didn't have Facebook, and we didn't have Instagram, and we didn't have Twitter. We had Friends Reunited. Do you remember that? Which was very nice. It was a nice, gracious environment. But the world has changed, and so there is a sense, and I suppose that's one of the reasons why change can be very challenging as well. There's a sense in which you've got to really adapt. If you do not adapt, then that's a real challenge. What do you think, Angie?
Yeah, I feel like off the back of what Pastor Joe was saying, I feel like rapid change really brings lack of motivation and a bit of apathy as well, especially when it feels like it's kind of hard because you don't know what you're working to if everything's constantly changing, if circumstances are not what you thought they would be, and I feel like the goalpost is always seeming further and further away, so I feel like it feels a bit tiresome, it feels a bit tedious, it feels long, and lack of motivation definitely plays a big part in a challenge when it comes to constant change.
Yep.
So true, isn't it? You kind of think that, you kind of think, Pastor, I remember something that you say, which I really like, is pressure doesn't conceal character, it reveals. And for me, certainly I find that when change comes about, it feels like there's a certain amount of revealing that goes on. And you've got the kind of people who find, want to keep up with everything that's changing. And then you've got the people like Pastor Joe was saying who maybe, want to feel desensitized from it and disconnect from it and try not to change with it. But it's certainly really interesting. And what is also interesting is for me to think about is, where does change come from? What do we think causes change? Because Pastor, one thing that you brought up was about how it's not change itself, but it is how the change comes about. And so what about when change is bad? Where does change come from? Is it God, for example, or is it something else?
Change comes from, if you want to take it from the spiritual aspect, I mean, the whole point of being a follower of Jesus is that God wants to change us. But it's not that he wants to change our personality, because that's a God-given gift, but he wants to change and challenge our character. He wants to, the whole deal of being a follower of Jesus is that this is about transformation, being changed, 2 Corinthians 3, from glory to glory. and to become more like Jesus. So there's a sense in which that's what the Holy Spirit wants to do. But that's a change that is to do with submission, surrendering to God's power, and that's a work of the Holy Spirit. Now, can the Holy Spirit use circumstances? Well, I think he can. Let's take the current circumstances, for example. Here we are in the middle of a global pandemic. Did God create that? Did God cause that? Well, I don't think so. I don't think that God caused the pandemic in order to fulfill some bigger purpose, but he's still God in the middle of it. So he may not have created the crisis, but he certainly never wastes a good crisis. That's for sure. Mm-hmm. And so God can take what even the enemy has meant for bad, and he can turn it around and use it for our good. So never underestimate, I think, what God can do, even in the midst of a crisis, even in the midst of a great challenging situation. Of course, it's not pleasant when you're going through it. Let's be honest. I mean, even these circumstances that we're going through now, it's not exactly pleasant. I am a natural introvert, but even over the last few weeks, I've been yearning for company, yearning just to meet up with people and for life to get back to normal. I suppose what makes this aspect, this part of the pandemic particularly challenging is the season that we're in, the winter. We're in the season of winter. And the sky is a bit gloomy outside. It's cold. If you think back to, back to May of 2020 or June 2020, it was sunshines, it was barbecues, it was banana cakes, it was, it was cheering the NHS. It was, hey, we can do this. It was brilliant because it was easy, and in one sense, not easy for anybody who had the terrible virus, but I mean easy in terms of the season. Now we're in winter, and that's a different ball game altogether. This is particularly challenging. But so I don't think that God always creates it. Sometimes of course he can, but I don't think it's always true to say that God creates circumstances where change happens, but he certainly never wastes it, and he can use it to sort of propel that work of transformation, at an even faster and deeper level in our lives. And so I don't think that God ever wastes a moment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I love that, Pastor Roy. What about you, Pastor Joe?
I like that. I really like what Pastor Roy said there. And also that, I guess, the spiritual angle as well, that you took it from when you started answering the question. As followers of Jesus, ultimately what we want to see is ourselves change from glory to glory. I think another perspective as well, in kind of like the broad sense of change, is if you look at maybe like the everyday change that we go through in life, the stuff that's probably more, for lack of a better word, earthly. I feel like we do ourselves a great disservice as people if we look at all change and kind of go, yeah, God caused that change. It's almost kind of absolves us of any responsibility. And I feel like that can be a bit of a cop out, or like an easy way out, when really what we should be doing is, as humans, is taking responsibility for our actions and thinking ahead. What are the consequences of this? What change does it cause? And, if I'm dealing with change, instead of going, oh, well, God caused this, so God's going to sort it out. It's like, what can I do about this? How do I adapt? How do I make sure that I'm still putting one foot in front of the other? How do I make sure that I'm still, having a culture of hard work and success and all that stuff going on? Because I feel like the danger with that kind of thinking of going, yeah, all change comes from God, is it kind of absolves us of any responsibility going forward, which I think sometimes it's a dangerous place to be in.
That's so helpful, Pastor Joe, and I love how you brought in there about our responsibility is how we respond to that change, so then I guess the question that is begging after, talking about how change comes, then how do we handle the change? I don't know about you guys, are there any principles of adapting to change that you guys have found useful in your own life experience?
Well, don't forget as well, there is the other little aspect that sometimes the whole point is that God calls us to bring about change. So we are in a circumstance and God calls us to be change agents. That's the whole point of the story of Jonah, not this Jonah here, by the way, but the Bible character of Jonah. God had called him to be a change agent, go and bring my word to Nineveh. Of course, he didn't want the people of Nineveh to, to hear the gospel. But when he did eventually go, after a long series of incidents, including being swallowed by a whale, etc., But when he did go, it was easy. I mean, change in Nineveh was easy. He just preached the word, and there was massive change. People repented. People were changed right away. The whole vibe, the whole atmosphere was changed. So there is a positive aspect to change that I think needs some thought and some consideration, that God calls us. God has called us to change our world.
Yeah.
He's called us to bring about change. And what does that mean? Well, of course, that's not like walking around like a superhero Christian with a cape on your back, superhero man of God, woman of God. No. It's just about bringing the kingdom in your everyday scenario. So these circumstances are not going to change me, but I'm going to bring change into these circumstances by being light in the darkness, by being salt and light, by bringing the kingdom of God's culture into this gossipy work environment where everybody's nasty and everybody's mean-spirited. But I am going to bring change because I'm going to be different. I'm going to be generous. I don't care if people don't like it. That's the change. I am going to be the change. So I would say that that's another aspect that we ought to be really encouraged about. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I love that perspective, Pastor Roy, because I feel like it's dealing with that attitude of, I guess, bringing us out of our comfort zones. Because I feel like obviously we could all like just live like a normal life. We could all forever, like for the rest of our lives. But actually, as you said, God has called us to be above a standard. As you said, He's called us to be a light, and he talks about the hidden, but like no one puts a lamp over the light shines. And so I feel like that's what change does. Change pulls us out of this just ordinary living and like pushes us towards like the things of God, the wills of God, and pushes us out of like just our natural comfort zones. And like I just love that perspective of actually like the change sometimes is not always inward. Like obviously change is like it comes from us, but it doesn't always directly just impact us as well. Like change can impact like the people around us too.
Yeah.
Sure. And I think the other aspect as well that's probably worth some consideration is that sometimes when society wants me to change, and that change means compromising that which God has called me to be, then that is never a good change. If change means, for example, you have to compromise your faith, well, have you ever noticed that you never compromise up? You always compromise down. Well, that's the whole point of Romans. Don't conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. So there is some change in society that we've got to just not go along with. The values of this world are not the values of God's kingdom. And so I suppose that's where I guess you can tell, whether or not you should go along with change. Is this going to bring you closer to God or draw you further away from God? If it's going to draw you away from God, you don't want to go along with that change. If it's going to draw you closer into the presence of God, then that's a good change. That's positive change. So I think that those are little measure marks that all of us have got to sort of use in our lives to work out whether we need to go along with this or not. Is it going to bring me away from God's house, where I'm going to miss out on community and miss out on what God's saying and miss out on this opportunity to worship together and to hear from God together? Is it drawing me away, or is it drawing me into the God's house, into community? If it's drawing me away, then that's not a good change. If it's drawing me into community, into deeper relationships with others, then that's a positive change. So those are just little caveats that probably need to go into the conversation as well. I would have thought. What do you think, Joe?
No, I agree with that. Absolutely. It's funny because that change is such a restrictive word, but such a broad word at the same time. Like there's so many different angles you can take it from, and I really love what you said there, that sometimes God calls us to actually effect change, and in that sense then it's thinking, how can I effect positive change? How can I effect change that is in line with what God would want? And so then you realize change isn't always bad. Sometimes change is actually welcome. Sometimes change is sought after. and sometimes change is necessary. And so it's important, I think, like you said, Pastor Roy, to approach it from all of these different angles, so that then when we think change, we don't just have this preconceived notion, which the world gives to us of change being a bad thing. Change is always an inconvenience. Well, no, it's not, because that's not all that changes. Change is not an absolute. It's rather a concept, and that concept could present itself in so many different ways and express itself in so many different ways. And so then you realize you don't actually have an issue with change. You have an issue with an event, rather, or the outcome of change, because change isn't the issue here. It's like, what is the outcome? Is the outcome, like you say, something that's good for me and drawing me closer to God, or is it something that's bad for me? So then you realize change is actually not that bad, and it's more principles. How can I make sure that whatever happens in life, because like there will always be change, how do I make sure that my principles stay my principles and I continue to head in the right direction?
Very good, Joe. Very good. And is the issue change, or is the issue fear?
Yeah.
Is that what the real issue? Am I afraid of of seasons changing, of life changing, just because I hate change, or is it more than that? And I suspect it probably is. It's probably an issue of fear going on there and insecurity, and it's in those circumstances. Every student will know the change that happened, for example, when you left mommy and daddy, and then you went to university, and then you lived off pot noodles, from week after week and month after month. But there was you remember that journey. Every student or graduate or graduand, I know my terms.
Soon to be graduated.
Yes, exactly. You will know that. Remember that journey that you took to uni. Remember that? Didn't you feel nervous? But it was the fear of the unknown. Probably that was the deal. But then you arrived, and it didn't take you that long to think, it's all right. This, isn't it? Yeah. So the lesson is that what was it? Old President, one of the presidents of America said, the only thing to fear is fear itself. And fear can be, God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of love, of power, of a sound mind. So for a lot of people, it's more than just change that they detest. It's that they haven't learned to deal with fear. And we have to make him Lord in every circumstance, whether it's the winter or whether it's the spring or whether it's the summer or whether it's the autumn, whatever season we happen to be going through in our lives. When we can learn to make Jesus Lord, then that's a win right there.
Yeah. I love that, Pastor, because essentially what you said at the end there, that is how you deal, that's how you handle change. You make Jesus Lord. He's the constant. He never changes, that's always there. I feel like when change happens, because we're all different people with different personalities and behaviors and whatever, everybody has a reaction to change. But at some point, you've got to come out of the reaction phase and you've got to get into action. And I feel like reaction is, it's feelings, it's emotions, it's very subjective. Action, however, that's decisive, that's objective, that's going, how do I get a positive outcome? How do I affect a positive outcome? And I feel like a lot of times we remain in the reaction phase for way too long. Sometimes we just stay in the reaction phase. We never actually get to action. And people think, oh, I'm dealing with this change. No, you're just reacting to it. And, at some point you've got to start acting based on your new set of circumstances or whatever. And what helps you do that? Realizing that you do have a solid rock and you do have Jesus in your life, and he is the solid. And so fine, great, have your reaction. There's nothing wrong with that. Everyone reacts to change initially, but at some point, boom, you get out of that. It's all about action. It's about moving forward. And I think
reaction or action in it.
So good.
When a 40-something-year-old guy tries to act like a TRG member, you know that something's not right. Acting in it.
Yeah.
It's going to be the new phrase now.
I'll tell you, it'll take off, Andy. You watch what I just said there. Boom! It like ran the world. Actually, no. Let's not use that illustration. I can't. By the way, I can't say things are going viral anymore. I've stopped saying that because
you're not. Why?
Well, for obvious reasons.
Why?
Oh, the virus.
Oh no, yeah.
In it.
Hashtag in it. Everyone's commenting hashtag in it. Amazing. Now I feel like that's super helpful because it helps to draw a line between where change is in our lives and how we respond to that. There's change that is thrust upon us, which is typically the change that can bring that fear, which can be the real heart of the challenge there. And I love the whole perspectives that were brought into that. So speaking of those kinds of change there, the type that's difficult, the type that is thrust upon us rather than change that we choose. Any thoughts on principles for adapting to that and dealing with that in life as we go through?
No.
I was trying to hit a mute on my mic and it was just muting itself back again.
Come on, Angie. Any principles, Angie?
Well, Pastor Roy, I feel like you said no, so I feel like if you said no, then what am I going to say?
It's because
when the pastor says no, that is not permission for you then to say, "Oh, I don't know either." That's your cue to impart deep revelations to the people.
No, well, I feel like only a small point. I feel I just love what you both were saying, and actually I just saw it in a whole new perspective in terms of when it comes to changes, because sometimes, as you said, it's the fear, and I feel like it's like how long can we wait it out when change is coming, especially when we know change is good, but we have to go through that transition bit from changing from one bit to another. And I think in that season is where the real grittiness of the change happens, because it's easy, change is easy once you've made it to the other side, but when you're going from one bit to another, that's when it feels tedious, or when it feels when you don't know what it's for, or when you have the fear. So I feel I guess a principle is just to stick it out. And as you said, when you make God your priority, that you're not changing for yourself, but you're changing for God. God is with you. Not saying that, obviously we've talked about how change doesn't always come from him, but in a sense of just being able to be faithful. As you say, Pastor Roy, it's not the leaps of faith, it's the step by step, it's the trudges. And I think sometimes we try and take on a lot of it and try and make change happen, and change happen one day, but realistically that's never going to happen.
Exactly.
So I think it's the day-to-day thing of just going with it and waiting it out.
Exactly. I love that. That's so true. Okay, now I got a verse for you now. Okay, but I can't remember the reference, right? I just remember the verse, right? Paul the Apostle. Somebody's got to get this reference for me. The first person to get the reference, Jonah's going to buy them a gift.
A Tesla.
A Tesla.
I was thinking of a bar of chocolate, and Joe's just gone straight for a Tesla. Anyway. But Paul the Apostle said, "I have learned to be content in all circumstances." Somebody get me the reference for that, and somebody needs to have that on your fridge or by the side of your bed. In all circumstances, I have learned to be content. I've learned to be content. Now, what he means by that, he is not saying that I have learned to just accept that whatever will be, will be. That is not what he is saying. People misinterpret that verse all the time. Philippians 4:11-13. Yeah, but I want the specific verse, whatever. So it's 11-13. Which one is it?
11 and 12.
People misinterpret that all the time, and they think, oh, you just gotta sort of almost, and it's an endorsement of laziness. Just go with the flow, whatever. And that's not what Paul's saying at all. If you look in the original language, what Paul is saying when he says, "I've learned to be content in all circumstances," is that he is saying, I have learned not to let circumstances master me, but I am going to be the master of my circumstances. That's what he means. Mm-hmm. That is what he means when he says, in all circumstances, I've learned to be content. Yes. Circumstances do not master me. I will master my circumstances. And I just think that is, a really good verse to live by. Change is a part of life. Life is a series of seasons, just like in the natural, seasons come and seasons go. Some people have favorite seasons. For some people, they love the summer and they just wanted to pause on summer, sort of 3rd of August, about there, where you can be sitting by the pool, drinking some Christian schlor, or whatever you drink, and just living it. But the challenge is that life is a series of seasons. Then you move into autumn. Then you move into winter. We're now in winter in the natural. And then we move into spring. So there's one sense in which no matter what season it is, I will not be overcome by the season, but I am going to be an overcomer. I am going to, so principles, what do you learn? You got to learn to enjoy the journey. You got to learn to just enjoy life. You got one shot at this thing called life, and then we'll go to heaven and get eternal life. But right here on the earth, I don't think that God's called us to endure this journey. I think he's called us to enjoy it. So I'm going to enjoy life, and I'm going to enjoy even the bumps and all and the things that I learn. Okay, it may not always be pleasant, but but I'm going to enjoy this. I'm going to keep trusting through this. I'm going to believe for God to work miracles through this. I think back to when we pioneered the Junction Church, and we started off with absolutely nothing. I mean, we didn't have any money, we didn't have any resource, but we started out on this journey, and my heart was, I can't wait to see what God's going to do here. And I look back 10 or so years, the best part of 10 years later, and I think, look at what God has done. I naturally should have worried, and it shouldn't have worked, but God has been so good to us, and look at how he's provided time and time again. And I got some stories to tell. And I think you've got to enjoy the journey. If you're a diary keeper, keep a little diary, write down some of the things that God does, write down some positive things that have happened, even in your challenging seasons. And then write them down, meditate on them, so that next time you go through a challenging season, you look back on your little diary and you say, but hang on, when I was going through that really bad situation, look at what God did. And if he did it then, he can do it again. So for me, that's, enjoying the journey is a huge, huge, and learning to be content, not being mastered by the circumstances, but being the master in the name of Jesus of my circumstances.
So good. Pastor Joe, any thoughts on that?
Mic drop. Yeah, I can't add to that.
Beat that, Joe.
What am I supposed to say?
In it.
What am I supposed to say? I agree. #, in it.
I would drop this mic if I could, but it's sitting on the stand. Honestly, there's never a mic. It's when Noel's
we need to have a special F&T mic that you pass around. Or everyone gets one. Don't pass it around, COVID, right? And then you just drop it when you make a fire point. Oh, there you go.
There it is.
Oh.
That was the worst mic drop ever.
Mic drop.
That was literally that was a mic flop.
That's 2 trends you've done tonight, Pastor Roy. #.
I tell you, watch that one go on as well. I tell you,
that one's blowing up. Yeah,
that's it. It'll be on TikTok. Pastor Roy. Okay, so anyone can answer this, but then flowing off of what you were
anyone can ask this, but you just said Pastor Roy before you said it.
So
I know I just changed my mind.
I'm going to have to honor the man of God and let him answer.
Can you handle it? So, okay, so talking about mastering the circumstances, how do we do that? How do we go about mastering the circumstances that the world brings our way?
Simple. You master the obvious. Stop trying to be complicated. Stop it. Stop looking for deep answers. A lot of Christians are wanting to go, you want to go so deep. No. Stop it. Just learn to master the obvious. Do what you do the best you can, live by the principles of God's kingdom. What are those principles? Well, look at the values that we live by as the Junction Church. You try to be generous when you're going through challenging times. I don't have any money. Yeah, but that's got nothing to do with being generous. So you learn to develop the values of God's kingdom. I'm going to be generous even when I'm going through these challenging circumstances. I remember a lot of years ago when I started out in ministry, this was about 365 years ago. And God taught me about generosity. Listen, I had nothing. I was living from week to week. I had no idea how I was going to get my money in to pay bills. I had no idea. I had nothing. Nothing, right? Nothing. And I remember I then began to save a little bit of money. I had this little savings account. I got 300 quid in my savings account, and I was so proud of it. Back then, I thought, this is amazing. And then I heard about this couple who were in ministry, and they were going through a really tough time. And and I heard that if they did not pay their rent, they would be thrown out of their home. So I prayed about it and I felt in my heart, even though I have hardly anything, I have got to be generous with that 300 quid that I've managed to save. And so I took that 300 quid and I wrote a little check out and I sent it to them just to say, bless you. And, that couple were able to then stay in their home. And to this day, that couple are in the ministry. They even tell that story. And they're doing really well today. It impacted somebody's life. But you know what? It wasn't really about the couple. It was about what God was doing in my heart. In my adversity, God was teaching me to be generous. So I think what you do is that you master the obvious. You do the thing that God has called you to do and be the person that God has called you to be, no matter what is going on around you. Because that's what God's got. So it's not more complicated than it needs to be. Just master the obvious.
I love that, Pastor Ray. I love that. It makes me think of that parable that Jesus told about the wise man and foolish man, and the wise man built his house on a rock. And Jesus said that the man who builds his house on a rock is like the person who lives by what Jesus said. And so oftentimes, we can find ourselves, looking at all of the details and trying to find what's the secret. But actually, there's no secret. Jesus has said it, and our job is to live it. Okay. I love that. Yeah. Any more thoughts on that?
Secret of Christianity. That's Gnosticism. That is not what God's called us to live by. Isn't that right, Joe?
Yes. There were a lot of words just said right there. I'm still kind of catching up.
What's Gnosticism? What Gnosticism is? Go on.
It might be my Wi-Fi, Pastor Roy. Did you say nautical miles?
Your wife?
My Wi-Fi.
Oh, I thought you said
Sorry,
your wife.
I thought you said wife.
Do you want to tell us something?
We're all hearing things.
Have you and Zara been secretly hitched?
No. Are we? Because I don't know if we are.
Anything can happen in this pandemic.
Pastor Jonah, do you want to change the subject? Maybe go back to that.
I have a question. So I
Thank you, Angie.
off the back of what you're
saved by Angie.
Saved by Angie. That's the third hashtag right there.
So again, like it could go to anyone, but
SBA. Hashtag SBA.
I'm gonna put that on a t-shirt now. Next Friday. FNC. Rep my own merch. Pastor Roy, obviously you talked about like pioneering the church and like, that being a change in your life. I guess then I'm not even in this situation, but like just in general, has there ever like been a time where like the change you're going to doesn't feel as good as like the current season you're in? And like, so basically my question is, how do we, because obviously we've talked about change being good, but how do you manage your heart when it feels like what you're going to isn't as good as where you currently are? Or when like the change that happens feels like doesn't feel as good as your past experience, basically.
Yeah, I hear that question. In other words, when the change leads to a place of disappointment, it's not quite what it was. But even there, it's like, remember that everything's a season. So so you came from the from this wonderful mountaintop experience, but you can't live your whole life on the mountaintop. Yeah. God's got to do some work in us in the valley. I mean, that's the whole point of Psalm 23. Psalm 23 begins beautifully. Do you know what I love about Psalm 23? It's like the author's having a little giggle as he's writing it. He's thinking, I'm going to lull them into a false sense of security here. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. Ooh, he leads me by he leads me by the Bahamas. He leads me by Nevis, where Chloe Williams lives. He leads me by green pastures. It's beautiful. You think, so this is a classic illustration of, I like this. This is good. But then the next part, he is with me in the valley of the shadow of death. Suddenly you've gone from green pastures and still waters to the valley of the shadow of death. This is exactly the point that Angie's making. You think, no, I think, if there's a choice between green pastures and the valley of the shadow of death, I think I'm going to take green pastures and still waters. I'll take the Bahamas over the assault course any day, And yet what's so interesting about Psalm 23 is that you learn so much more, not in the green pastures and still waters, as beautiful as those things are, but the psalmist learns so much about God and his provision in the valley of the shadow of death. I love it. I love the picture. He's in the valley of the shadow of death. Even the very name, the shadow of death, not death, the shadow of death. It's a threat. This is bad. And then I'm and he prepares a table before me in the presence of my enemies. I got some enemies, and they see me in this valley of the shadow of death, and they think this is your demise. This is the moment we've been longing for. But he says, but even in the valley of the shadow of death, this is where God provides the finest meal I've ever eaten. Where was it? It wasn't by still waters and green pastures. It was in the valley of the shadow of death. And that's the whole point of Psalm 23. Somebody write down Psalm 23 in the comments there, will you? Because somebody needs to put that on your fridge beside Philippians, whatever the other text was. In fact, just need to read the Bible. Basically, that's what I'm trying to say. So sometimes change, it doesn't feel on the surface like this doesn't feel as good as what I had it before. But you know what? God's grace in your life is not circumstance dependent. Whatever you're going through, God's still God, and he is good all the time, no matter what's happening. And I think these are things that I've had to learn in my own life. Again, that gets back to, that's why Paul says, I've learned to be content in all circumstances. No circumstance masters me. I'm going to master my circumstances.
That's so
Philippians 4:11. Thank you. They put up the proper quote. I'm not saying this because I'm in need, for I have learned to be content whatever the circumstances. There's Philippians 4:11. Thank you, whoever did that.
That's Noel in the tech booth.
Noel's in the control room. He basically controls the world in there.
It's true. It's true. No, I like that. I really like that. And so, speaking of being content, then, how do we handle the tension of being content where we are and preparing for future change?
Oh, that's good. I think if you lose the fun factor in where you are, you lose a lot of perspective, don't you? And you start. There's nothing wrong with look into the future, but if you forget the present, then I don't think that's good. You can't neglect the now because you're expecting a better future. So I think keep that fun factor. And how do you do that? It's by not doing life on your own. It's by doing life with people. I think earlier on we were talking about how you kind of deal with change, and I think another way to do that is Pastor Roy was really answered really well when he said just master the obvious, and I'm thinking that's brilliant. Absolutely, that's true. You just got to be practical and practically surround yourself with people who can help you get good perspective. So like the wrong way to deal with change or the wrong way to prepare for change is to be completely theoretical about it, and it's just all happening in the head. That doesn't work. It's about practice. It's about what I'm actually doing. And you're going to find it a lot easier doing it with people who are also going through whatever changes they're going in their lives. And better still, people who all have one common goal or one common thing, that unites them all. In our case, obviously, we all love Jesus, and that's what unites us. And we all serve a greater purpose. And so then I can be really practical about stuff. I don't have to be just theoretical. I don't have to neglect today because I'm hoping for something better tomorrow, because I'm having fun still today. Yes, it's not the greatest, but I can have fun because I'm surrounded with great people. And yes, I know it's a bit of a challenge at the moment with coronavirus, but still, one of the beautiful things that you come to realize about having strong relationships and building and fostering strong relationships is that they can stand the test of events, and those relationships can actually stand the test of change. And I think that's a really good indicator of how strong your relationships are. How is it doing right now when there's a lot of change going on? And what you will find is a lot of things will change, but if you can keep those strong bonds with good people, you can keep the fun in your life. You can keep the good vibes, if you like, going on, and then you can plan for the future, but you don't have to neglect today. And I think that's how you kind of handle that.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, in the comments here, I got to tell you that Noel's claiming his Tesla. I mean, I thought that he put up that scripture because he was a man of God, because he loves Jesus, because he loves Christ. No,
he's put his own comment.
He wants a Tesla. Look, there he is. The man is a leech.
I'll tell you what, Noah, I'll get you a Tesla.
Power.
I'll get you the logo. I'll get you the logo. I'll get you the key. I'll get you a key.
The key to the kingdom.
The keys
May
to
not
the
be a
kingdom.
car, but there'll be a key. There'll be a key.
Angie, what did you finish off
Sorry,
then?
sorry.
What was the question again?
The question was, how do we handle that tension of being content with where we are and preparing for future change?
Yeah, I feel like just having like a heart of gratitude really goes a long way. Just being grateful for what God has done, what God is doing, and what God has yet to do. You know, we come with a heart of expectation that He's got great plans. I mean, it says that he's got great plans for our lives and he's got great futures for our lives. And so we don't always have to be in the future to know that the future is going to be good. Yeah, like journey, as we've talked about, might be difficult, might be a little rough, but ultimately what God is taking us is so much better than where we've already been. And I think as well, I remember always Pastor Ray talking about, like, you know, we don't live in the land of nostalgia. Like, we talk about the good old days, but the good old days have come and gone. Like, you know, we appreciate them and we've learned a lot from them, but we can't live in the past because we'll never be looking forward. So I feel like when you have a heart of thankfulness, it recognizes that God is good. God has always been good, but like God, like there's still so much he has yet to do. And I feel like just, a heart of gratitude really just goes a long way when it comes to preparing for the future and being, expecting good things as well.
I love it. And, you know, as we bring this to an end, okay, let's go around all of you, because these are challenging days. And you know, there's lots of challenging stuff going on. But I want to hear something that each of you are encouraged about. You know, because I would encourage everybody to do this. Just keep, you know, yes, we could focus on all the stuff that's going wrong, but make sure that you also recognize, you know, that it's not all gone wrong. You know, God's doing some good stuff. So something that you're all encouraged about. Joe?
I think what I alluded to it earlier, just relationships, the people that I do life with. I know we talk about this quite a bit. I think back in March of last year, obviously, when we as a church, we recorded a bunch of services to show online, and everyone kind of, after recording, we did it over 2 nights, and then we all left, and there wasn't any sense of certainty of when we would actually get back together. And it was, you were like, what's life going to look like? And as the months unfolded, you realized that there was actually a lot of change going on. But what was so encouraging was to see how our church community just stayed really strong, and people were really there for each other. And I think for me, it's something that I've really benefited from. I think, for example, a few months ago, obviously getting made redundant from my job, and that can be such an empty place to be, but I never felt empty because my life was full. And that's something that's really encouraged me.
Angie?
Yeah, I feel like I do a lot of work with young people. I lead the youth ministry, This Rising Generation, and something that's really just encouraged me is just to see the hearts of our young people during a time like this. I mean, they have gone through ridiculous amount of change since last year March, and just to see, I mean, I'm not like invalidating, like, you know, the emotions that have come through it, but actually I see them every week, and just to see the smiles on their faces, to still be wanting to be planted in God's house, to be putting God as a priority, recognizing that this circumstance and situation doesn't stop them from, like, isn't their destiny. This is just a moment in time. It's really encouraged me just to have a larger perspective on life. And I feel like if our young people can trudge through it, then we can also trudge through it as well. And just to see the community and the relationships and them guys going from strength to strength really is just, something that's always encouraged me during this season.
I love it. Jonah?
Yeah, I would say I'm really encouraged just seeing how God is still at work and doing amazing things in the life of our church. We've been running another Alpha course that has been what's certainly one of the biggest, if not the biggest, Alpha course that we've ever done. And just the stories of people who are connecting in there, people from no faith background at all, people growing up in, you know, just have no idea what's going on with the relationship with God, to people who are exploring it, and just hearing how they are figuring out where they're at with faith and leaning into God and learning more about that is just incredible. So I'm so encouraged by that.
Love it, guys. Amazing sharing tonight. Thanks so much for sharing like that. And by the way, just kind of say to everybody, this Sunday, I mean, every Sunday, join us for our online service. Can somebody put the link up to that? We're going to be introducing and announcing the theme tomorrow. We're going to bring you some great teaching. We're going to have some great worship. And then we've got one or two things to share with you as well. We've had some pretty amazing things happen this week, and we just want to share them with you on Sunday. And listen, why don't somebody in your world needs you to invite them to join us for our online service this Sunday. So why don't you get that link, right? And share it on your timeline, share it on your Facebook page, share it on your Twitter, share it on your whatever Instagram, share it on Friends Reunited, share it on
Version.
I'm trying to think of what was that social media thing that was a big deal and now it's gone.
MySpace. Is it
MySpace. That was the one I was thinking of. Yeah, sure. On your MySpace. Is that still a deal?
Well, I don't know.
I'm going to have to get me one of those MySpaces then. I don't want to be left behind. I got to be with it. So I'll share it. Whatever, But listen,
they were the
be
good old days.
amazing. Going to say again.
The good old days of MySpace.
Yeah. Well, we're going to relaunch it. It's going to be our space.
Come on now.
Hey.
See what I did with my head?
There it is.
That's the 4th hashtag, by the way.
Our space in it. Hashtag
In it.
our space. Hashtag in it. So make sure that you join us on Sunday. It's going to be a lot of fun, and we're going to have an amazing service, and it's going to be a really, really good Sunday. We just love you guys loads. Thanks for sharing tonight. That was absolutely brilliant. So there's some thoughts on how to navigate change. I hope that at least something that has been said tonight will really, really, really help you as you navigate all the huge changes of this season as well. This has been a huge, massive season. There's never been anything like it. And so I hope that something that we've said tonight will really help you with that. So anyway, have a wonderful evening, whatever you're doing. Go and have a cocoa. I've taken to drinking cocoa now every night, by the way, at 8 p.m. So got to get mine. Do you drink cocoa? Anybody else?
Pastor, I thought you were an Ovaltine. How do you say it? Isn't that
Ovaltine?
is it Ovaltine?
What is the difference?
Isn't that one
Is
more
it?
milky? I
Isn't it
think that one's
malty?
more milky.
Oh,
Malty,
milky.
that's it.
Oh,
Yeah. It's more malty. It's quite
yeah,
nice.
but I'm trying not to have sugar. You see, it's sugar-free cocoa that I'm having at the moment. You see.
Okay. All right.
Listen, I'm into it now. Stop trying to get me to change, Angie.
Hey, Angie, do you cocoa with change well or?
Oh,
Stop.
Wow.
On that
No.
bombshell.
On that
Yeah,
bombshell.
that
Bombshell. We love you guys. Have a wonderful evening, and we'll see you Sunday.